Welcome back to The Rebel's Edge. I'm Jon Najarian. My brother Pete and I will be breaking down what's breaking down in China and what's jumping around a lot. Hint, it's something that goes into your car if you don't have one of Elon's cars. We've got that and more on The Rebel's Edge. Bam!
There it is. Yeah. I got my microphone like you now, John.
Yeah, these things are the greatest. Whoops, there it is. That thing is the greatest. Welcome back, folks. He, of course, is Pete Najarian. I'm Jon Najarian, and we are The Rebel's Edge. Jared is handling all the computers, the graphics, the countdown clocks, all the tough stuff. All Pete and I have to do is talk about this stuff. So let's dive into the macro minute, Pete. I'm going to say FXI, which is, of course, made up of stocks like NetEase, Alibaba, PDD, Pinduoduo, all that kind of stuff. Substantial declines 2 days in a row. It was down 9%, which is the biggest drop since 2008. Yesterday, and then again today, it was down 6%. But guess what? As soon as we came in here, it started rallying, and it didn't get into positive territory, Pete, but it did get to a 1% loss rather than that big loss that I was talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think, John, as far as the macro right now, I think there's two things really that I'm looking at. One of which is these hurricanes, and Milton specifically. This is just amazing when you talk about $175 billion in damages projected so far. And that's back to back because we just got done with Helene. Although we didn't get done, the cleanup had hardly even started. And now we've got this. So a lot of really tough stuff going on. It's going to affect the markets to some degree for sure, especially the poor folks down in basically the southeast part of the United States right now, specifically Florida. But the other thing that I'd say, CPI on Thursday. Everybody's going to be watching data, and then we move into earnings. And I think that CPI is something that is and has been very, very market moving.
Yep. And obviously the Fed knows that things like hurricanes will jack up inflation. And it's why we've got the 10-year back over 4%, Pete, and so forth. We'll see how this CPI comes in, which will not include the recent debacles that Pete has talked about. And by the way, folks, if you'd like to join us, we are doing a special on Thursday. So it's not just going to be about the CPI. We're going to be trading superstorms, and we're not looking to profit from other people's pain. That is not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to describe for you, all of you who will attend, our outlook for various sectors of the market as well as stocks within those sectors. So if you want to know how the insurance stocks are going to work, how the reinsurance stocks are going to work, how the home builders and some of the generator companies and all of that kind of stuff, things that you may have thought of, we're going to break it all down with trading superstorms. If you take out your phone and scan that QR code, it will take you to the registration page. It is completely free. We will be showing you all of that. And we've got so many special guests coming in, folks. We've got JC Peretz from All Star Charts. We've got Charlie Gasparino from Fox News. We've got General Anthony Tata, a 3-star general that was also number 3 in the Defense Department. So just a fabulous group of special guests, as well as our team. And we're going to break down for you volatility, what's moving and what's not, and what's likely to happen given the severe damage, sadly, that many of the folks in the Southeast are experiencing. And as I've said before, pray. There's 3 things you could do right now. Pray, donate money, actually 4 things, I guess. Donate your time if you're in that area after the storm passes and you can volunteer. Please consider that. And the 4th thing, you could donate blood, because believe it or not, storms like this end up requiring a lot of blood because people get hurt, and the blood draw is tremendous. So think about joining us. Again, it's a free seminar on Thursday, 4 o'clock Eastern time, completely free. And we'll be breaking down best opportunities, stocks to avoid, stocks that you may want to consider if you're investing right now, because this will drive investments for quite a while. All right, Pete, fantastic futures. You know what I'm going to hit today? OVX, because the oil volatility index, because that's what it is, OVX. Think of it, folks, as the VIX for oil, for crude oil. Now, it traded up to almost a 52-week high yesterday. It was up 10%. It's down 8% today. It falls back to 48. Why is it moving around so much? Well, when you look at crude oil, you'll know why. Crude oil has been, running to the upside on anticipation of Israel, for instance, going back after Iran, and then running to the downside when they don't do that. And that continues today. What do you got, Pete?
Well, it's perfect. And we don't always schedule any of this. We just kind of do it on our own. But I will tell you, John, I was going to hit crude. And the fact that not too terribly long ago was $65 a barrel. Now we jumped all the way up. On Monday, we were over 77 per barrel. And now we got underneath 72, although now we've bounced back up to 73. So to your point, that volatility within oil, crude itself, is absolutely on fire right now. What else is on fire? Well, it's easing back a little bit, but the volatility index itself, John, we got up and over that 22 mark for the VIX. We pulled back a little bit. I would say right now the range would be 19 to 21. So that's what we're looking at as we go into a lot of those catalysts that you and I talked about already as far as the macro.
Yep. Well, great explanation, Pete. Now let's dive into a bit of unusual activity. Now, if you're new to the show, you know that Pete and I are talking about stocks and the catalysts that are moving these stocks. And occasionally we talk about the unusual accumulation of calls, which would be bullish, or puts, which would be bearish. Well, today, $6.7 billion takeover of Arcadium Lithium. This is, of course, what you're looking at on the screen there. The 9th of September, we saw those 250 calls being bought. That gives you the right to buy it at $2.50. As you see here, the stock jumped in the pre-market pretty dramatically, over 30%. So at $5.50, that's $3 above the $2.50 level. So that means that 10-cent investment went to $3. So that's 30x, folks, 30x. It's not 10x. That's why I'm not wearing my 10x hat. It's not 20x. It's 30x. And Pete was talking about this one when we saw this activity first hitting, right, Pete?
Yep, we talked about it then, and we also talked about it on Monday, John. We talked about how Rio Tinto was kicking the tires. They were talking about somewhere between $4 billion and $6 billion. I know that's a wide range. By the way, it was above that wide range, $6.7 billion on this takeover. It's cash, John. This is a magnificent move to the upside. 585 is the level in which they're willing to pay per share. But this is an incredible run to the upside. And we've talked about this before, but critical minerals that are out there, that is something that we know is going to be very, very active, not just in this one stock, but I think in others as well. So I think we all ought to be paying attention to the materials, the minerals, and all of that we see out there. I think there are opportunities that are going to continue to come up, and I think we're going to see even more of this kind of M&A, which is why we like those big investment banks that are out there, John, the ones that really are cruising. Why are they cruising? Goldman Sachs and Citi and Bank of America and JP Morgan. Well, because of the fact that that part of their business is absolutely on fire. This is a great example of that.
Well, and as you pointed out to me, Pete, we have unusual activity again today. They're buying the 550 calls in April. Now, again, I'll belabor this just this much, folks. None of these deals close like that.
Right.
It takes probably 6 months for most of these deals that we talk about to get finalized. Why? Well, because the government has to approve it, Federal Trade Commission, depending on which sector of the market we're talking about, the banks or whatever. In this case, I think it's going to be interesting to watch them maneuver. And as they maneuver, Pete, somebody else could try to swoop in. That's why somebody else is buying these 550 calls out in April. So they want November, December, January, February, March, April, 6 months. How much did I say? 6 months. Somebody wants to be all the way out there 6 months into the future, Pete.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. Helen of Troy. Helen of Troy, these guys make a lot of stuff that you use in your kitchen and elsewhere. Consumer brand product company. Yeah, they're up 20%, Pete. They delivered quarter top and bottom line beats, and then they reaffirmed net sales and profits. I mean, this is just an astonishingly good quarter for them, Pete. I don't know if they had to cut prices to get volumes out like this, but boy, people really liked the report, and obviously they like what Helen of Troy makes.
Well, and they did just everything you'd ever want in an earnings, right? When you come out there and you crush the earnings, that's great. They crush the revenue, that's great. You crush on the profit side of it, and you actually guide that it's going to continue to be like this. You beat on the annual sales. You reaffirm what's going to go forward on annual sales. I mean, just about everything you could say in a positive way was said by this company on this delivery. And on top of that, John, you've got some large shorts in there too. So talk about a little bit of a squeeze. Why is it up as much as 20%? Well, a little bit of a squeeze. And I would say this, when you look at this company and you say, well, what is the PE of this? Well, it's an 8. So is it expensive now because of what they've just told you, how good things have been, how good things will be in the future? I would say this thing is pretty inexpensive still with an 8 PE, that's price per earnings. I would say that this thing could absolutely warrant 12, 14, something like that. I think there's upside still left for Helen of Troy.
Yeah, well, Pete, OXO is one of their products that's everything from can openers to scrubbers and things like that. And they kind of make them look like they're a little more luxe, a little more luxurious. It's not just a piece of metal that you're using. It's a piece of metal with some rubberized things to hold on to and all that to make it easier to grip when it's wet and all that kind of stuff. They're not just putting out a bunch of, like I say, cheap 99-cent stuff. Their stuff is probably 2 to 3 times more expensive than most of the competitors that you could buy on the shelf. Maybe people just wanted to treat themselves a little and buy some of that. I don't know, Pete.
Yeah.
All right. BYD. This is one that Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett clued me into years ago. It's a Chinese EV maker, and honest to God, they make, I think, Pete, the best looking EVs in the world. And yeah, I like that Elon Musk has done what he's done here in America and then branched out into China and into Europe and so forth. But these vehicles that these guys make are tremendous. I don't know if you've seen the videos, Pete, of the vehicle just pivoting like this, where it doesn't need to back up or anything. The wheels turn and it can literally pivot like, you know, it's on a turntable or something. Just incredible. Well, these guys now say that they're aiming for 100,000 vehicle sales in Mexico by 2025. Now, I don't think they can sell here yet, Pete. And the President Trump has been talking about tariffs because obviously he doesn't think it's a fair competition if they're taxing our stuff going into their country and we're not taxing theirs or putting a tariff on it. But this is a pretty big announcement out of BYDDY today.
It is a big announcement, John. I think one of the concerns would be, and maybe this is a read through by me at least, of why isn't the stock a little bit higher? Why didn't it jump? And last I looked, and maybe it's improved, but last I looked, it was down 1.5%, maybe 2%, something like that. Not a big deal, but I would have expected a much bigger spike than we really got. So when I look at this one, is it interesting? I think it is pretty daggone interesting. And especially, like I say, the read through would be, well, the tariff part of it that you mentioned, if President Trump were to become the president once again, that I think might be something that could be a little bit of an issue for BYD. So that's why maybe it's not getting the kind of jump that you and I were looking for. But that being said, when you look at what they've got, cash versus debt, they're in a great spot. Their cash burn, however, John, is massive at $30 billion. So they kind of equalize each other out, and they do have profits. So they make some money, which is something that we always like to see. And I call that out all the time. I got to see companies that once they've been public for a while, especially a longer while, they need to be starting to make some money. And these guys are doing that. They're trading at about a 19 PE last I looked. So interesting to see. I'm just a little bit surprised that the stock's not having a better sort of a move to the upside right now.
Yeah. Well, yesterday, I think we mentioned, Pete, on the show that with all the Chinese stocks just getting cracked, this was the only one up yesterday. So maybe somebody was trading ahead of this news yesterday. Don't know for sure. But there was a reason that it was up yesterday when Baba, Billy, PDD, all these stocks were just getting cracked. So anyway, let's dive into one more stock, Pete, GitLab. It lost about 13% in the past month. So did that make it more attractive? Well, apparently it did make it more attractive to a Morgan Stanley analyst, Pete, because he recommended it pretty highly today and set a $70 price target. 78 is the 52-week high. This thing closed last night at $50. Right now it's trading almost 54. So 7% rally today. What did you make of the Morgan Stanley upgrade here, Pete?
The upgrade, I think, is pretty phenomenal, John. They also, when you look at the numbers that they've been able to put up recently with earnings, the revenue year over year is up 30%. They had $182 million that was a very big, strong beat that they had there. They beat on billings. They beat on the annual recurring revenue. It's a company that just seems to be really working pretty well from that perspective. They got a great balance sheet. When I look at it, and you said, up there towards 70, near the 52-week highs, I'm just even curious. It's up today a little bit, call it 5%. Last I looked, it was trading right around $53. I think this thing has a lot more room to the upside as well. Like you were just talking about, I don't think that's over, and I agree with the analyst. I think that there's room to the upside, possibly to test that 52-week high.
Yeah, well, it's a nice move today, and like I say, it's still some $24 off the 52-week high. So
yeah,
worth taking a look at, folks. All right, also worth taking a look. We love sharing these. I know that I've been remiss not putting them up as much, but by popular demand, we've got Bench Warmer Brand. Isn't that what it says, Pete?
Oh,
I'm not
that's
always so good at that. Yeah. And he does great parody stuff. And he's taken a shot at the Jets today. They're sort of a punching bag for a lot of us, including Pete. So let's listen to what he has to say.
Hey, Robert, you ready for the Bills this week?
Yeah,
No, you're not, because you're fired.
You're firing me? Why?
The team just isn't meeting expectations.
The defense has been great, and that's what I'm in charge of. If you're going to fire anyone, fire Hackett.
Oh, we can't do that. Strict orders from the boss.
Woody told you not to fire Hackett?
No, the actual boss. Aaron.
Hackett is my boo
the
bear.
actual
I
boss.
should have known that had something to do with this. You tried to hug me. That's what this is about.
That and you
tried to hug me.
literally all the time. That was a real deal breaker.
This franchise is such a
That was a
joke. No
deal
wonder Bill
breaker.
Belichick only spent 5 minutes here before
There's a
scribbling
problem
his
in
resignation.
that
Hackett. You guys saw what a
organization,
shit show
John.
this place was and couldn't get out fast enough.
You know what? That's a good point.
What, you've realized how messed up this all was and you're giving me another chance?
Oh, God, no. You just mentioned Belichick, and we need a new head coach.
What do you say, Bill? You want to come back to New York and bring this thing full circle? No, eat shit and die.
You're right. We should probably name an interim coach.
How
We'll
long
circle
was he
back.
with the Jets,
Back to
John?
head
Like
coach.
a
Aaron,
couple
as much
months?
as we love doing everything you say and would drag our balls over 3 miles of broken glass if you asked us to, we really can't replace a head coach who got fired mid-season with the only other guy on the staff who did the same thing.
Fine, give it to the DC. He's just going to be my
Okay,
permanent.
fine.
Make sure his ass gets fitted for your hand right away.
Wait, what? Now, as far as permanent head coaches, who do you think we should go after if Bill's not interested? I'm not.
I've got a few ideas.
Do they start with Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Maybe. Fantastic.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
That was one of your best. That was one of your best.
That's a funny guy. And we're sharing the name there, folks, so you can follow him on Insta if you want. Very funny guy.
Yeah.
All right, Pete, what do you got as far as real sports news instead of
Well, and
parody?
we were talking about Saleh yesterday because we were right on top of it when they made that decision. We were doing the show and we just decided, hey, we got to hit this up a little bit. And what happens to Saleh? Does he go somewhere else? Somebody that needs a defense? I'm not going to talk about defenses right now. I'm going to talk about first-round draft pick quarterbacks, John. There were 6 this year. So a couple of them haven't even seen the field yet. Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy got hurt. He's out for the season. Michael Penix has to sit behind a quarterback who's actually probably playing a little bit better than a lot of people expected because of his injury. and probably, I would say, outplaying Aaron Rodgers, at least so far. So we'll see if that continues. But now you've got the quarterbacks that are actually playing. You've got Bo Nix, who in his first couple of outings, not so good, John, had a couple of, I think he had 4 total interceptions. In the last 2 games, he's got no interceptions, 3 touchdowns. I think these guys are starting to at least look like they're getting over the hump to some degree. Caleb Williams, kind of the same thing, John. He had 4 interceptions in the first 3 games, and he hasn't had one since. He's had 3 touchdowns, but no interceptions. Jaden Daniels, though, is the standout, right? I mean, you and I have talked about this kid. This kid is damn near at MVP levels for the league, for crying out loud. I mean, when you look at his numbers, John, and you look at his completion percentage, you look what he's been able to accomplish so far, absolutely. How about his QBR? It's a 106 already this year. I mean, this is a guy who's been, he was Arizona State, then he goes to LSU, gets drafted at a very high spot. But this week, I think what makes this whole thing even more interesting, New England, they're giving up on Jacoby Brissett, and they're going with Drake May. And I think the Drake May move could be pretty interesting. I don't know that I think, John, he was at the level that everybody else put him, but he's had a little bit of time. He's got a little bit of time to sit back and watch. New England's not terrible, but do they have enough to make it work out for him as a quarterback? That part, I think, is where we need the answer. But you could have said that about Washington, right, before Jaden Daniels took over. I mean, they were a team that had a terrible defense, a terrible offense. They couldn't get much. You didn't even know half the players on the team. And yet that guy now has lit them up, and people are starting to take notice at Washington. Do you think Drake May is ready right now, John? Because he is one of the youngest, if not the youngest, of the 6 quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, Pete, that he's breaking out the same way that the quarterback did in Houston last year for the Texans. It's clearly one of those situations where what you and I said, we love to pat, or at least I love to pat myself on the back, saying we said he should have been the top pick of all the quarterbacks. Stand by it. I think any of the teams that have Caleb Williams or Drake May or any of these guys, Pete, including J.J. McCarthy, would love to have this guy because he is a stud. And it looks like he's just getting better each week. So, Caleb Williams, I'm not saying he's terrible. I'm not saying that at all. And, he's starting to come around a little bit. I mean, he's got 1 more touchdown already than Daniels. He's got 5 TD passes, 4 interceptions, and he was the number 1 pick overall in the whole league. So he should have these kinds of numbers. And for the first time, he is having these kinds of numbers, like he's getting better. But he needs to be putting up multiple TDs in games, Pete, rather than, the whole season. His season total is 1,000 yards, 5 TDs, 4 interceptions. The TD to interception ratio is concerning.
Right. Although these guys, I think they're showing that they're getting a little bit better as they've gotten more time to be able to perform at the pro level. And that does take a little bit of time. I mean, other than Jaden Daniels, these other players, John, I think, they threw the interceptions. Now they're not throwing the last couple of games, the interceptions. And I think that is a critical thing, because giving up the ball is something that you just can't afford to do unless you're really an outstanding football team. And none of those teams are outstanding, which is why they had the ability to draft these guys as high as they did, quite frankly. All right, how about a little college football, John?
All right.
So I'm looking at the top 5 right now in college football, right? You've got 3 Big Ten schools and 2 SEC schools. But you also have the ACC kind of scratching at the door a little bit, and then the Big 12. So I was curious what you think, like which one of these teams is likely to be somebody who could make that next step, not only be where they are right now, but get into that top 5. You've got Miami 6-0. You've got Pittsburgh, believe it or not. Pitt is 5-0, so they're undefeated as well. Clemson had their opening game loss, but now they're 4-1. BYU is 5-0 in the Big 12. You've got Iowa State 5-0 in the Big 12. And there's a team that's kind of a sleeper, John. Nobody talks about Texas Tech. They're 5-1. These guys are lighting it up on offense. I mean, they truly are, and have some defense. And all these schools, obviously, they're doing a great job on the defensive side and the offensive side. So For me right now, looking at everybody, I would have to go with Miami, which is the easy pick. But they did struggle against Cal, and Cal gave them all they wanted till the last maybe 6 minutes of the game. And then Cal just sort of fell apart. But Miami's a pretty damn good team, and that was a long flight. That's going to be brutal part of the ACC, having these, teams that are out on the other side with Cal and Stanford. It makes it very interesting. But I think it's Miami and maybe BYU of the two teams in the two different divisions, or the conferences. But how about you? Is there somebody who really stands out that should break up into that top 5 maybe?
Well, there are some teams, like, for instance, somebody's going to fall out of the top 5 this week, Pete.
Yep.
Because you got Oregon hosting Ohio State. And that is going to be a game, I think, because Ohio State, they emptied the NIL, Pete, the name and image and likeness pool for their players this year. They're the highest paid, even higher than the Longhorns, Pete. So I think Ohio State going into Eugene is a really interesting game, because you're looking at, obviously, powerhouse teams with a lot of pro potential players just on both sides. I mean, when they line up, Pete, there might be 22 guys each time, whether it's offense or defense, 22 guys on the field that could be putting on pro jerseys next year. That's how good these two teams are. So, and I'm not saying they're all number 1 picks, folks, but I am saying, you've got this Dylan Gabriel for Oregon, and Ohio State looks awfully good as well. This is the big test. This is the one that Pete and I talked about at the beginning of the season. This is the big one. Nobody thought the big one was going to be Vanderbilt and Bama, but that might keep Bama out of the playoff contention here, Pete, depending how Vandy does on the, winning out from here. But I like this game the way it's shaping up in Eugene this weekend, Pete.
Yeah, Dan Lanning, the coach there. I love the guy, and I not to throw any bad stuff towards you in Colorado, John, but last year when he defended his guys on the field and then in the locker room after you had all the Colorado players stepping all over and scratching all over the duck on the middle of the field after complaining about somebody doing it the week before in Nebraska, I got to tell you, that one was tough. But I will say this, Colorado's kind of sneaky good too, John. I don't know if it's all about who they've played up to now, or now it gets a lot, more difficult or not. But they're playing great, at least on offense, and they're lighting it up pretty nicely. And you got to give Deion Sanders a lot of credit, because I know the O-line isn't what he thought it was or wanted it to be, but his son continues to throw the rock, and he's throwing it all over the place. And that guy is proving to a lot of people that, you know what, whether you like him or dislike him, he's a hell of a quarterback.
Yep, Shador is, Travis Hunter is, and let's not forget, Pete, they had a week off. Colorado didn't play last week, folks. They're playing this week, and they've played really well against UCF and against Baylor, I think it was, Pete. Two teams they knocked off, and they beat UCF badly. Yeah. So could this be that, like Pete's saying, I mean, one loss to Nebraska isn't necessarily a deal breaker for them, but it might help motivate them to continue to play well, because since that loss, they've played better in the post Nebraska era here, Pete.
And what might help them the most, John, is if Nebraska keeps on winning. that helps Colorado on that loss, because the more they win, the better that makes that team that they lost to. So that's something that, believe it or not, they're probably cheering for Nebraska every week.
Yeah, I bet they are. Well, folks, remember, we are offering you a chance to come for free to a great webinar tomorrow, Thursday, at 4:00 Eastern Time. And as we always do, you will register for this. And if you register for it, even if you can't make it at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, we will send you a recording of the event that you can watch over and over again. You can watch it when it's convenient for you, because we understand 4:00 Eastern may not be convenient for you. But all you got to do is scan that QR code right there on the screen, and then you register and you can join us tomorrow. We'll remind you on the Rebels Edge tomorrow. But again, this is 4 p.m. this coming Thursday. So tomorrow's the 10th, 4 p.m. on the 10th Eastern time, but you got to register ahead of time. That said, have a great day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern time.